Here it is. Okay. Okay. Hi, Rosemary. Do you go by Rose or Mary or Rosemary?
Rose or Rosemary.
Okay. Awesome. Um, just kind of landing here with both of you as we explore your compatibility. And so this work, I want to give you just a little bit of background and then the process. And then I'm going to actually, in a relationship or relating, we look at each of your charts. It's important to know each other and see each other directly before we actually bring the charts together. So then it actually makes sense in how you both come together and, the ways that you're compatible. And there are ways where we need to support alignment, coherence, things like that. And then we'll look at just different practices and tools for support. Before I begin, I always like to make sure that I have all the dates correct. So, Katie, Catherine, you were born December 10th, 1988, 4:07 a.m., Tacoma, Washington. Okay, great. And then Rose, you're born same day, December 10th, 1984, 9:16 p.m., Mountain View, California. Okay, wonderful. And so I'd like to begin then our reading by just landing and arriving and opening. I love relationship compatibility and analysis. It is so, you get to a place in your relating where you're like, okay, let's take it deeper and open. And so I find that this is really important in a relationship to have clarity, to have an understanding of what the challenges that may arise in your relationship and the different ways that you can then navigate through them. Otherwise, it's very difficult. And also, I see this as really union, sacred union, partnership as a path to liberation. I think I told Katie this, that I lived in a tantric ashram for about 7 years. And so a lot of our focus has been to be in union first with ourselves. And so this is something that's why I really love going through the compatibility first by looking at your relationship with yourself. Because what you're actually relating to is really a lot of times a reflection of you. And so it's important to just be clear and to see ourselves more clearly before we project that onto another person, which happens in relationships. Okay. And so let's just open the circle, calling in with a prayer and intention of the circle being of love, light, healing, and clarity, that this union I'm just feeling ancestors and beings come in. The blessings of this union, the blessings that have been, the blessings that are rising, and the blessings to come. Whatever lessons and challenges that there may be, that it be for good and for benefit. What is wisest for each and for each other. Okay. And so, yeah, sometimes I'll get some things from the ancestors, which will come in a little bit. Really feeling the circle coming together and those who support the union. making themselves known. We ask for your guidance and wisdom. Okay, may the one that has no other, the two that are truly one, the three that play together to allow the rise of the cosmic sun be bound to goodness and love, and by all things good and light be now done. Okay. So let's begin by looking at each of your charts and let me know, do you have any questions by any? And then no questions? Okay. So
Not yet.
okay, let's look at the charts. So this is a combination of, just to say, 5 elements, pole star, Batsa. And these are the things that I studied with my teachers for many years. And so bringing these different charts together, I look at first your personal charts and then compatibilities. Starting with Katie, when we look at the chart, the first thing we look at is your body constitution. This is important simply because your body constitution or your body type is important to know. If your body type is, there's 4 different types: hot, cold, warm, and cool. If it's unstable in any way, it can actually affect your subtle energies. If you're not able to stabilize physically, it's more difficult to actually surrender in the subtle levels. So we look at the physical level first. And in your chart, you're what we call lesser yin or a cool type. So there's a coolness in your body, specifically in your stomach area. And if there's a coolness there, it's important to keep your body warm. It's important to eat warming foods that support your digestion. And then it's also important to do exercises because your body needs that support of circulation. And so with the body type, then we look into your different elements. There are 5 different elements, as you may already know. Everything is made up of 5 elements, and we have all of them, but in varying degrees. And in the way they are in your body will then create the way you are in your body, the state, the dynamic, and how you're influenced by the other elements that's external, including your partnership. And we'll get into that in a little bit, because a lot of the times we're attracted to the person of the element that they have that we might be lacking or weak in, which we see in your charts. And it's good to really see and play that dynamic together to see how you're both nourishing each other. So in your chart, there's a coldness. The strongest element in your chart is the water element. The weakest element in your chart is the gold element. The strongest is the water, which is associated with the kidneys, the urinary bladder, the lower part of the body. So a lot of your strength is in the lower part of your body. The weakest element in your chart is the lungs. Actually, it's the gold element. So that's the upper part of the body. So that has to do with your lungs, your large intestine, your immunity, circulation, and breathing. And the personal element in your chart is yin earth. And so that being yin earth is about being nurturing, being the mama, being caring. And a lot of the times people who have this as their personal element, they have this intelligence. Actually, they intuitively know how to care, intuitively know what the other person might need, simply because they're focused on the other person, sometimes more than themselves. And with that being said, also it's yin earth, so it's gathering. It's not young earth where you're completely out there, but it's also the gathering, the nurturing, the self-care that's really important, and which will allow you to feel your way home in the world. Now, you're also born in the year of the dragon. So this year, as you know, coming up February 10th is the dragon year, the wood dragon year. So when the dragon is actually in the dragon year, it's actually about our journey, facing ourselves, coming face to face of who we are and who we're becoming. And the Grand Duke is it's interesting when the dragon meets itself, it's what they call opposing the Grand Duke. What does that mean? That means that there's a call to leadership. And if you don't answer to it, it can create some negativity and self-sabotaging. So there's a lot of things in play in your chart this year specifically that focuses your attention in your leadership, in showing up, in being the dragon. And in the dragon, you have all the 12 animals within you, which is unique to the other animals because they don't. And with that being said, the 12 animals give you a lot of resource, a lot of energy, and if you're not able to wield them, they can also be overwhelming and create more drama and emotionality. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But as you can see, there's certain elements, obviously, that you have in your chart, but there's some, like for you, the dragon year, because you're born in the dragon year, that is going to be a lot of energy that's going to be moving through you. So then the relationship will take a different toll. You know, it has a different way of navigating through the relationship for you to this year as opposed to next year, or how it was in the following year, in the previous year. So keeping that in mind, that just because these compatibilities, you know, in the way that your elements are fixed in the chart, show the different levels of compatibility, that compatibility can shift depending on the year. Okay. Let's see. So in your chart then, with being with your elements as such, there is this, I want to go through it. Okay, there. It's important for you to eat warming foods, as I was saying. If you're not able to eat warming foods, we're not only digesting food, we're also digesting thoughts and emotions. And with that being said, sometimes it might be more difficult to be present or to digest the emotions if the stomach doesn't feel settled energetically or in the subtle. In Chinese medicine, the earth element is associated with intelligence. And if it is compromised in any way, then that process is compromised. And so the intelligence is not only about gathering information, but it's also sifting in order for us to actually make a decision. So when the stomach is cold, sometimes worrying can happen, overthinking, anxiety, and if it's not addressed, it can lead to depression. And there's 5 different types of depression in Chinese medicine, and one of them is actually lacking energy. Because after you've overthinking, over worrying, all of that, that actually takes a lot of energy to sustain in your body. So then therefore, it could plummet and leak the energy. The energy can plummet and then it can leak. So then, yeah, just being mindful of that coldness energetically in your constitution. Now, with that being said, you also there in the way your elements run, there is this tension between the desire to be alone and then spending time with other people. And it is important to have a safe environment in order to recalibrate, a safe environment to help empower you to answer the right calls on your energy. Your body can be prone to exhaustion, looking at your chart. So it's extremely good to take extra good care of yourself. You cultivate wisdom by being alone and playing. That's how you actually get downloads, and that this is very natural for you. However, it is important to really reserve your energy for that. Otherwise, you might just be exhausted and not have energy for it. So it's important to do that. But it's also important to get feedback from others so that it helps you to actually see yourself more clearly. The opportunities that come in your life is actually through the people you know, and the quality of your relationship determines the quality of your life. Okay. And because you get your wisdom from play and opportunities, you're here really to play. Your strongest, as I was saying, your strongest element is the rat. The rat is resourceful, is creative, and it has to, because it's so small that it needs everything. It needs to know everything and in details in order to navigate, in order to survive. What was that?
I'm so funny because I'm your I was curious if the play we were saying it needs alone time and play. I was curious, play could be with others, or is it alone play?
Oh yeah, in general, she's here to play. And so sometimes that playtime is alone and sometimes it's with others. And sometimes there's a tension where she doesn't know. Because she needs to actually reserve her energies, and she's actually sensitive to other people's energy and the environment. And so then therefore, because it takes her so much energy, she needs to actually play by herself sometimes. And then when she has more energy with other people, and again, she can be prone to exhaustion because of all the energies that she's expending within, like all of these things. So it's really important to take extra care. So yeah, play can look many ways, but being mindful of what that is important. Part of that is also self-reflection during that time. Part of her process and self-discovery and growth has a lot to do with self-reflecting.
I
So
do that a lot.
yeah.
It's not my life.
Yeah. Let's see. So, and then there's an indicator emotion. So the weakest element, as I was saying, is the lungs, and the emotion associated with that is grief. And so sometimes grief can arise, or this feeling of sadness and melancholy for no reason. And it might just be because you need support in your lungs. You need to do a breathing practice, pranic practice, yoga practice, and movement with breath is really important for you and your health. Once you have your circulation and stabilizing your breath and being able to breathe deep is really important for you in order to actually access more subtle aspects within yourself. So that's also important. Let's see. an indicator emotion that you have. Each person has an indicator emotion where their limits is like that's your threshold where your limit is, and that is anger for you. When anger arises, it means something is off. And that doesn't mean anger doesn't have to like it's random. No, it's actually a teacher. So anger for you is a very interesting emotion in that it teaches you something. It indicates not only a boundary has been broken, but also it's anger, the other side of that, as you know, we transform it into compassion, into love. And that begins also with us. In Chinese medicine, anger is associated with the wood element. The wood element is associated with the liver, the eyes, the soul, right? And the soul and the dream time. So when the anger is acting, it means that there's a misalignment with any of these things, with your soul purpose, with your soul vision, what's happening, the boundary. So it's really important to just be aware of that. And that doesn't mean that means to take a step back and reflect. Like, why am I angry? Why is this arising? What was my role in creating this situation? And what do I need here? Right? And then finding compassion instead of reacting, etc. It's that call to find, okay, where am I not aligned with love, with compassion first for self and then for other. Let's see. And there's so many charts that I'm like from here to there. So it's like, okay, that's why I'm looking at so many different things here. The other thing that I wanted to share as an individual chart is that your timing, according to your charts, your timing is faster than most. And so because of that, you're here actually as an initiator. You're here to create change. And sometimes you may not be the person to finish the projects you start. So knowing your pace is really important, especially in a relationship. It's important that you and your partner have a similar pace. Otherwise, you will outgrow each other. One grows faster than the other a lot of the times. And so it's important to know this particular pacing. And for you, you could jump time if you wanted. And so it's important then for things of the past not to get in the way. You can't get to where you're going if you're trying to bring everyone with you also. It's important to just really see who's aligned to support you and the vision and what you're creating and how you can support each other. And in so many ways, you're here to support the change that's happening in the world, right? And that change is not happening out there, it's actually happening through you. So there's a lot of things that you've come here at the soul level to really support the shifts and changes. And so your partnership also has to reflect that and be aligned in the terms of how your work is in the world and how you can support each other doing that. And then the power is here, is that one of your powers is to speak your truth. And that is really a translating divine inspiration into action. Divine inspiration, your divinity, your highest self into this embodiment of this being in this lifetime, right? And so that does require a lot of play and openness because it isn't what has been. It's in that play and opening and surrendering and creativity that allows you to open in the depth of your being. And so part of that is being alone and allowing yourself to just that freedom of play without judgment, without feeling like you're seen by others or judged by others or anything like that, but just allowing yourself to open to the deeper guidance there. Yeah. So as an initiator and visionary, you have an innate intuition that's in your chart. And that's not something we say lightly. It's important. Sometimes, some people, they can't really trust their intuition because there's a lot of blockages and things like that. But you have innate intuition, and there's the power of your timing. A lot of that is according to the timing. And it is important because of the work that you're doing. And you have a lot of support from your ancestors, in particular on your father's side, on the patriarchal side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of connection there, and they're supporting you and they're honoring the work that you're doing in the world. And so it's really beautiful if you did create like an ancestral altar, or you do ancestral practices and you honor them and venerate them to really strengthen that, because a lot of them are strengthening you to activate what you're here to do. Yeah. Okay. There was. Okay. Okay. So that's time goes by so fast, seriously, with this thing. Let me see. Okay. The other things I wanted to just bring your attention to is that there is, in your chart, in the partnership, there's a kind of like a positive and a challenge in being in partnership as an individual. One is that your partner is a teacher, and there's a lot of things to learn and to open to enjoy, and just really honor the gift of love, right? And in union. But there's also something in that's coming from your ancestors, and it's not certain whether it's patriarchal and matriarchal, but there is like a wounded ancestor, and that's causing insecurity, that's causing instability. And so when there is a challenging arising, it is so important that before you react, especially if it's an important decision to make or an ongoing issue, which means it's if it's an ongoing issue, it's become a pattern, then self-reflection is one of the important things to do, is to step back, self-reflection. What part of this is mine? And then to do a practice to clear it within yourself, and then come into engagement. If you choose to have children, your children are actually one of your greatest gifts in this world. Where in having your children, you will continue to expand even more, deepen even more, and realize kind of the depth and expanse of your calling for the next generations to come. So it's
What about with her kids?
What was that?
About with her kids, not my own.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, whatever children you decide to caretake, that's absolutely, in partnership, you guys can figure that out, however that looks like. Okay. There is, what's interesting about your chart too, is that there is this thing about career and sometimes travel where there might be a glitch. And in truth, it's because it's not about the career. It's about who you are and what you're manifesting in the world, and allowing that to be the stability, to be the guide, to be what you create. It's not about creating a career. So that's what we also see in the chart. And in regards to actually working with mentors and teachers and superiors, they can really lift you up. They can really support you. Sometimes we just looking at, because in the dynamic play of partnership, and that partnership could be with a lover or at work. We look at also like how are assistants versus superiors. And for you, the superiors are okay. There can be really beautiful learnings and openings and discoveries with a superior. So that's good. Okay. And so with also your ancestors, there's this quality of regalness, princely, the throne. And so there's this quality of really being at the circle, in the center, holding that space, remembering what is noble. Right. Okay. So there's that. Did you have any questions for me?
No, I'm just laughing at some of the things coming up or just things we've talked about.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So then let's take a look at Rose's chart. Okay.
Oh no, it's with the royalty because it was in the Joydish reading as well. That's
Oh,
an interesting crossover. Yeah.
yeah, cool. Yeah, no, that's one of the things and why I love studying different systems is because when there's these crossovers, that that's true. There's so many correspondences connecting. I love that. Yeah, connecting the dots. Okay. So Rosemary, beautiful. I'm just looking quickly. Okay. Okay. So because you're both born in the same month and day, there's a lot of similarities, specifically your body constitution, which is great because then you can actually eat the same foods. There are some people who are in the opposite, and so someone has to have a lot of hot foods and the other cold, and it's like, oh, it's a lot to cook and think and plan. But for both of you, that's not an issue, which is great. Can keep it simple. And yeah, just like Katie's, it is important for you to have warm meals, easy to assimilate, easy to digest meals, and something warming to support because of that cold constitution you both have.
Cool.
So you're born in the year of the rat, the month, the strongest position is also a rat. So I see that you're the one taking notes.
I'm taking notes on my phone now.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Well, but both of you are rats, but it's details. And it's really important, especially if you're like a double rat in this way. Sometimes you might get lost in the details. So it's so important to actually take a step back and look at your life, the bigger vision. Okay, what is the principle and function of what I'm doing, rather than getting lost in a rabbit hole and putting your head on like, what is going on out there? So it's important to just, yeah, do a reality check once in a while. But with that being said, you're extremely intelligent, resourceful, creative being. And it's a great year, actually. The rat and dragon, they're actually great partners, because then the rat, jumps onto the dragon and the dragon flies and gives the rat what they need, which is the aerial view of their life. Right? And the dragon is fast and can, the rat is fast, obviously, but can only go so far because they're really tiny. But in dragon, you can see, like, let's say, the whole encompassing world and universe. So it's really beautiful that both of you can really support each other to see the bigger view of life, and also then the details. That comes in that's very important in being in a relationship, to keep things in perspective and to stay clear of the direction you're both moving towards. Otherwise, sometimes you can get lost in the fantasy, and then, or in the details of the suffering of the moment. It's great to have perspective.
Can you share with how rat and dragon interact with snake?
Oh, okay, yeah, totally. Yeah, okay, yeah, I can. Just before I forget, for the rat, because you're a double rat, an important thing for you, just like for Katie, it was breathing. For you, it's important for you to have gazing practices where you gaze far, not into the sun, but far beyond the sun, and then gazing closely and then looking at the peripheral. That will support you to actually see far beyond, okay? And not getting lost into details. So that's just a simple practice to do. And then, so in regards to the three, the rat, the dragon, and the snake. So the snake is in Chinese medicine, it's the most mystical of the animals. And usually, is it a yin snake or a yang snake? Do you know?
I'm not sure. He's
No.
77.
What was that?
1977, does it?
Okay. I mean, I can look that up, but yeah, in general. So the snake is,
And their constitution appears very yin.
yeah, okay. So they're usually, they are usually compatible. When I'm thinking about this year in particular, it's a good year for them in that there's a lot of auspices or stars in their chart that aligns them with the rat and the dragon energetically this year. They are more inward, and they're really shamanic. So the dragon, which is really interesting, right? The dragon, if you think about it, is the most mystical or majestic animal in the zodiac. It's so strange because you have all these farm animals like the pig, the goat, the ox, the sheep, etc. And then you have this dragon. And so the dragon, what it symbolizes, that it goes between the worlds. And it's actually, in its flight, it's circuitous. It doesn't actually fly straight. And that's because it's navigating through all the different dimensions. Right. And so in that way, it meets the snake. The snake is mystical, is shamanic, and is more spiritual first. It always comes from the spirit, and then it enters into the world of physical. And that's why a lot of the times they can't be bothered because they're in their own world. They know, they know they know it. They know, like, the spirit informs the quantum physics, that informs the physics, that informs energy, that forms the reality. And so they're all the way, they know, and they can sense and intuit things beforehand because they're really navigating at that mystical spiritual place. So the dragon meets the snake, and the rat, like if I look at your chart, In regards to the snake, you know, that because you have this quality of, well, you can get lost in the details, you know, and that in so many ways is also subtle, like little. But at the same time, you have this, yeah, because you don't have dragon, just to say, in your chart. You have a tiger and a pig. And so it can be okay. The dragon and the snake are more compatible than the snake and the rat. But there could be a lot of play because the snake, even though it can't be bothered by many things, it will listen to something wise. And so the rat, being in the details, can access some of that. So energetically, they may not be compatible, but through intellect, they can be. And as you know, sometimes the snake eats the rat. Yeah.
We've been feeding that.
What was that?
It's all right. We can move on. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. So what's really interesting about your charts is that both of you are actually missing the gold element, which is the lungs. Again, so it's important for both of you to have a breathing practice. And there's many kinds, and I can share a few later. And then your personal element, as Katie's is yin earth, your personal element is yang earth. Which is, yeah, really interesting. And how both of you, that's yin and the yang components, and it's in your personality elements. So there's that play of the masculine, the feminine, how you interact together. Both very nurturing, and the earth is associated with the intelligence and this quality of actually territorial, like, okay, this is what we need to do in regards to this situation, in your own life and territory. But you both navigate it differently, one yin and one yang. So one is more internal, one is more external, which is really interesting because in your charts too, there's so many things that balance that. All right, so it's a very interesting play in regards to that. Okay, so okay, so in your chart, there's also in partnership that it's in the Emperor and the Tutor house. So there's a really good auspices from being in partnership and seeing and holding and honoring your partner and their work and who they are. That is just natural for you. However, in regards to having a superior or being under authority is not that great for you. So it is interesting, and it is important then to just be like, how are we like in partnership, holding that equality, equanimity, supporting and loving each other, and then the hierarchy of authority. So that's going to be an important place to navigate and to be very clear about. Otherwise, you will feel disrespected. So it's important, that piece. It's important also in your chart, you know, part of being in partnership, and we're going to talk about this when we get into compatibility, is the wealth, the resources, and all of that. And so I always like to look at, okay, who's better at handling money here? You know, so it's important, you know, and so both of you are okay, but Rose, you might need some more support. Just, I don't know, sometimes people have already learned that about themselves, or like they learned how to do that, the finances, how do we
I'm terrible at handling money. I'm pretty good at making it, but I'm not very good at like organizing it and things.
Okay.
Yeah. Um,
Good, I'm glad
I
you're
just like,
able to
like
admit
if,
that.
if I need more money, I just make more money. I'm not very good at like saving or like any of that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
This in your chart,
Good at the other.
yeah, this is interesting because in your chart, this is part of an ancestral thing, an ancestral wounding of in your ancestors, somebody died without, you know, what they needed. And so then therefore it shows up in this weird way, in the way of really sustaining oneself. And like, you know, yes, I deserve this. Yes, I can keep this. Yes, it's okay. I can handle this, because they weren't able to actually know how to do that in the past. And a lot of the times in Chinese medicine, we are a culmination of the ancestors, right? Are their bones, their personalities, their character, their traits, etc., are parts of who we are. And it's just important to then, oh, what parts of me have been wounded that I need to actually heal? And some of that is not necessarily us, but the lives that we continue to carry within us, which are our ancestors. So again, doing some kind of ancestral practice, and just, you know, being aware that it's not something some people think, and this is what's really interesting. Some people think like, oh, that's just me, but it doesn't have to be. You know, you could do practices and veneration and just have a prayer that may this ancestor who felt this way be healed from that, and then feel it in your body where you're actually feeling that. Where do you feel like that energy? And then go into it and see what actually is there. And if there's an image, a story, a feeling that you need to work through in order to release and heal and bring wholeness. So just, that's just in your chart there to work with. That
Yeah, some things that I'm coming up with that, but I don't know when, if you want to talk about it later or not, or just a
yeah,
personal thing.
no, absolutely. And this is just like seeing, right? Who you are, so to speak, according to the systems. And then we do the real work where, okay, these are some practices, these are some ideas and suggestions to support you to heal those things. Yeah, this is, I lived in an ashram where they taught me this 5-element system, etc. And the reason for this is to heal our lives, is so that we can actually gain perspective. And because it's very difficult to actually navigate through here. And these are the systems that can actually detail that for us, so that we can understand, what do I need to do to become whole again, right? Otherwise, we're just guessing sometimes. So it's important to have these pieces, because the actual problem is actually not knowing what the problem is. If you know the problem, then you have tools and resources to resolve it. So this is what this is for. Okay. Let's see. Okay, and so let me do. So for you, the indicator emotion is bitterness. When bitterness is arising, that means you have done too much. You've given too much. You're overextending yourself. So take a step back and say, okay, what am I bitter about? What's going on? Where am I not in alignment? Right? So looking at that, and at the, when we were talking about let's see, and you are actually a natural empath in your chart. So an empath is not only one who can feel things, but a lot of the time take it in. Right? An empath really absorbs energy. And so it's really important for you, because you do that, to have protective practices and being mindful in terms of the places you go, the people you interact with, because you will take on their energy. And then a lot of the times, you know, as empaths, we process these energies thinking they're ours. And then once you start processing them, they become yours. And so then you get overwhelmed by them instead of realizing that they're actually not yours. And it is a choice to bring those energies in. So it's important to, again, and, you know, we've been teaching, like Katie knows some protective practices, and I'm not sure if you know some, but there are some that I could also share. Okay. Let's see. So you were a champion of strangers and lovers alike. And sometimes, because you can get lost in the details and you still feel like you're figuring it out, like you're always figuring it out because you're lost in the details, you're really a catalyst for change for others to learn. And a lot of that is not necessarily because you take the authority, but because you bring people along the way for the ride. You bring, you know, you're that ally, you're that supporter, you're that inspirer kind of person. And there are people who actually love to live vicariously through you because of the way you are, right? And your impact, actually, because you do your due diligence, you know, you work hard and smart and in the details, you know, your impact goes beyond your own community. And because sometimes you can get lost in the details, it's important for you to see the mistakes as learning opportunities, not get stuck in the details. Looking at it so closely, that can be so critical and judgmental. So it's really important for you to really remember that mistakes are expected, and that's how part of the process of your learning. And that is part of your process of trial and error. And that you are also, it's interesting because you in your chart have this tendency that find things that are ready to like the disruption, like you know, things that are ready to be broken. And then so what do? What happens? And then how can you actually, what's the next level? And that the creation from all these pieces that are breaking, how do you then create into something new? So it's really interesting how your chart is really in the details. Yeah. Let's see. And yeah, there's in your chart too, because of the way the earth and all of that is placed, there's like a magnetism about you. And a relatability and lovability about you as well. Again, it's just not because you assert yourself as authority, but you're the ally on the journey. And that's so endearing. Super endearing. With that being said, it's also interesting in your chart, you're all about the now. What's happening now, not the future. And sometimes you don't even know what's going on in the future. Like I'm into the now. And so that's your superpower as well, is being here and teaching, like, what is the gift of now, being open, the presence of now, and in the details of it, which a lot of people don't, even though they're present, they might still be in the shallows, they might still be at the surface, but you're actually relating from the depth of your being in the details. So it's really beautiful how both of you, as Katie is this fast moving dragon, so to speak, and here you are with like your presence, right? And riding the dragon, and as you're looking at the details, she's looking at the whole vision, and just carrying each other in that way. So that's really beautiful. And there are so many similarities where you both can understand each other and have a meeting place, because you both understand this quality of nurturing and this quality of needing self and being sensitive to others, but at the same time you work in the world. So there's a lot of beautiful compatibilities that you both share personally and also in your work in the world. Okay, now let's see, just getting this here. Okay. Yeah, it's just saying like you have a very active conscious mind. All right, take noted. So let's look at your compatibilities now. Did you have any questions in general? No? Okay. So let's take a look at the compatibilities. When we look at the compatibilities again, in relationship, if this is like it's sacred union as love, love as a path to liberation, then we really look at relationships in a different way. It isn't just tit for tat. It isn't just like, what do you give me for that? It isn't that at all. It's that liberation piece is really serving the other. And in serving the other, we serve ourselves, seeing ourselves in the other. And we see our partner as our teacher. We see our partner as a reflector, as mirror, and we see our partner as the divine. So through those eyes, we see the different ways where we can connect, we can surrender. And this is really important in love relationships, because if you're not able to surrender, if you're not able to trust your partner, if there's too many challenges where you're like, you don't trust your partner, then it's very difficult for you to actually access anything deeper because you're already closed. So what's really important here is to see, where are the places that I'm open? Where are the places that I might be closed? Where are the places do I need to move through in order to open again? Because in the love relationships, love is revealing to you the places where you're not aligned to love, to the love that you're wanting to create. So with that, let's take a look at the different ways you both are already compatible and are open. right? And then looking at the ways that there are challenges. In every relationship there is, and it's in varying degrees. And okay. Okay. So in the 5-element system, there are 4 compatibilities, base for compatibilities. So if these were not compatible, we just tell you to run the other direction. Because it's not worth it. It's just too much work for the person. And not unless you're into that. It's a lot of suffering and struggling that we're projecting onto each other, which can create more suffering. So in your charts, there's a lot of compatibilities. So the first compatibility we look at is a personality, which is how do you meet each other in terms of personality? Is there a meeting ground and understanding? In your charts, there is. We were talking about it earlier as Katie is yin earth and Rose is yang earth. So there's this way of earth. And so to nourish that compatibility, to nourish each other's personality. And when we say personality, we mean character and behavior in the way you're presenting yourself and to the world. And the way you can do that is to actually really honor your home, honor the space you keep together. Don't blame each other, blame the furniture, do feng shui. I mean, and so also honoring that one is yin and one is yang, right? And the way the earth then comes together to really honor those aspects within you. And so there might be a different way of seeing a situation because one is yin, one is yang, but knowing that it's not opposite, but a way for you to broaden your own horizon and seeing a situation. So like, oh, that's how she sees it. That's the yang version, or that's the yin version. Like, oh, wow, I can open to that rather than, oh, that's different. Because what's interesting is that when we begin relationships, we're open. And so we love the difference that our partner brings into our life because it's new and it's fresh. But later on, when we want to come back into our own comforts, then we oppose that which is different. Like for example, a person who's very active might be like, oh, I love him because he's so chill. And then give it 2 years, like, oh, I hate him because he's so lazy. It's the same thing, but seen differently. So this is also what happens with the yin and yang. So it's important to continue to stay open and see that it's a perspective. And what brought you together in the first place can sometimes be the opposing factor that sets you apart, but remembering it's actually your perspective. So the second part of the compatibility here that we see is that the physical part is really important, simply because sometimes you can actually cause each other illness. And so in your chart, boom, 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 it's compatible. That you guys, there is this attraction. There is a way of being together physically, creating things in the world, that there's a flow. There's a way of being together where there's a lot of power in what you bring together into the world. This is also important simply because in a more subtle level, a lot of the times what we are creating are patterns. And so what we think, sometimes when we're in relationship for a while, we start to have ideas and thoughts about the other person. And so when we have a conversation with the other person, we're not actually relating directly to them, we're actually relating to the thoughts that we have of them. Oh, this is how she is, and then she's just telling me this, and then this is running. So I'm actually relating to my own thoughts rather than to the person directly. So seeing this in your chart, that is something, I mean, it's natural for everyone to do, because we start to create images and identities, not only of ourselves, but of others. And so it's important that we bring consciousness to what we're actually creating and how we're relating, and the stories we're telling ourselves about the other, because that is the person that we're creating. And so in our relationship, and love as a path to liberation, it is being mindful of the stories we're creating about the other person, and then the stories we're creating about the union. And so being compatible at the physical level, this is something that both of you can actually navigate through. Like, what are these stories? And so it's important also, like once a year, to renew your vows, whatever that is, if it's handfast, if it's, whatever level of engagement and commitment you have for each other, to really renew that and make sure that you stay current with the stories you're creating, not reliving the stories of the past. Yeah. Okay. And then the third compatibility is what we consider the long-term compatibility. In your chart, it's called open. That means it can go either way. It's not compatible and it's not compatible. There's a meeting place, there's a grounding place, like to meet, as we were talking about. And so the long term really does depend on you and the work. And so when we see that, then that's when we talk about the pace of growth. How is your pace of growth together? And one can move faster than the other. One can, go a different direction, etc. But that this is a place where we then surrender to love. That love actually is the guide. And in that surrendering, that the love is expressing itself in however it needs to manifest itself in the relationship, in the way you're relating. Right? So what's interesting is that there is the vows and commitments to love. So when we also see this is really important, and to realize that what are your commitments and vision, and what are you saying limits your relationship? So for example, and this can only be done in a love relationship. This can only be done in a highly committed and dedicated relationship. If you say that, let's say, okay, I'm going to leave this person if this person cheats. Okay. If, that is the mark of where you leave, then be it so. But if the higher purpose is not actually the relationship, but love, what is love teaching you? So in that case, in truth, you could leave the relationship or you could stay. In that, whatever lessons that need to be learned is being learned. And the trust that wasn't there is now actually active. Because the trust was based on you not cheating. But now that you cheat and now it's possible, what is there? What's the depth of trust? What's the depth of love? So then you, in the path to liberation, is actually saying, you are free to love me. You're free to go. You're free to do all these things, right? And it's in what they then choose to do that creates the depth of love you both share. So it isn't limited by just what has happened, but what is being created through what is happening. I know this is a little bit different, but it's what is real, because love will reveal your deepest wounds to heal. And so knowing your partner, knowing that you can trust and surrender is important, but also knowing that these things that have blocked you from completely surrendering may be what actually needs to arise for you to truly surrender. So the long-term compatibility here is open. The other compatibility then is the emotions. Sometimes one emotion can take over and can be, emotions, energy, power in the relationship. So here, in regards to emotions, there's just double checking. Okay. So here, the emotional part is sometimes, Katie, there might be something that triggers you and there can be an emotional cycle. We ask you not to make decisions when you're in the emotional cycle. You have to wait until it actually settles and where you can observe it. And then from there, you can make a decision. So that self-reflection that we were talking about earlier is really important. And then the way that manifests for Rose is that because you're really present, you're in the moment. And sometimes the future is very difficult to assess or to feel out or anything bigger. You can get lost in the details in the present moment that can also limit and cloud your decision making or the way you relate or react to a situation. So doing practices together is really important to synergize the energies to prevent that from happening. Yeah, there's many different practices you guys can do together to really honor synchronizing the energies so that there's flow and there isn't like a glitch because of that emotional and other cycles that's happening. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. I just, it's interesting because I've never experienced myself as somebody too like attentive or like interested in details. And I am all like very like visionary of like what are we doing in the future, to the point where I have to like actually make myself hold presence for the present. So it's an interesting reflection of like this is where it's like, you know, patterned in this way, but yet that has not been my experience necessarily.
Yes. That is really fascinating.
Because
Really?
I love to dream big and like, you know, like future
Yeah.
like all these different projects. And then I get overwhelmed with like which projects to do when,
Oh,
or like prioritizing like, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. Wouldn't this be great? You know, and then there's all these amazing things. I'm great at coming up with ideas of things to do. But not necessarily great at like finishing the projects or you know, I'm like a great like start a new thing and then not really necessarily wanting to finish it. Has been like my experience. So it's like, yeah, interesting to say, oh, like all these details. What
oh.
I mean, I guess I do notice a lot more than people notice usually of like what's in the now, so I can relate in that way.
Yes. Okay. Oh, yeah. Um, yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thank you. And yeah, tell me a little bit more. So you're saying, I just want to put this in the notes because that's really different. So you're saying big and different. Sometimes like thinking in the details, which is really fascinating to me. And I'm wondering, I can look at your chart, but yeah, those are the indicators in your chart in these three.
the little details of the projects too.
Systems. But I mean, okay, so yeah, interesting. I just want to look into your chart and see what you were saying and how, just the other aspects and
That's
and
the water.
it is like your personality is male yang, so your energy is yang, right? It's more out into the world as opposed to Katie's, which is interesting, as I was saying, because you guys can balance each other out in that way. Because she's dragon, but your energy is male yang. So here's kind of like that territory. Male yang is more about, like this. And because you're quite intelligent, male earth is very intelligent. Yeah, it knows how to navigate through things and is very resourceful, but that's interesting about the double rat situation. Okay, thank you for sharing
I
that.
mean, maybe it's just I never thought of myself in that way, but maybe it'll reveal itself more and more as I'm like bring my awareness to it. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
But yeah, I would say I definitely look to a lot of future projects or like, well, why don't we do this and then in the future do that in the future? Why don't we do a 5-year plan, 10-year plan? So there's like a lot of like, goal-oriented movement. But then I guess that is like details of how are we going to get there? This is what we need to do. These are the projects. What are we going to prioritize?
Yeah, that's
So yeah, I guess in that.
yeah, there's a lot of details there. That's really interesting. And what's interesting to me is that again, when we're thinking about the future, right? If you can just think about this, I mean, in so many ways, the present moment actually offers the 10,000 possibilities. And you being present actually is quite aware of that. The sensitivities of the present moment is one who is like in tuned or actually is connected to all time and space, right? If we can really look at what it means to be present, is that. And then because you are really connected to the present moment, then you see all the different possibilities. How about this? How about that? How about that? How about this? How about this? That's yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I would translate that. So interesting. That's a very yeah. Okay. Let's see. And then so also for both of you, it would be great to have, like we were talking about, breathing practice, ancestral practice to kind of support the healing of there and connections, strengthen the connection. And since what's happening then as you bring, like you have this relationship and it's deepening, the ancestors then also connect, right? So then the support of Katie also then comes into Rose's life, so to speak. And usually people don't get together unless it's actually approved by the ancestors to some degree in like a long committed relationship. So honoring the ancestors, because there's a lot at play here that you're bringing together to heal and to honor, right? What's coming through. Okay. Let me just see. So as I was saying, there's like 3 compatibilities and one that just needs support in terms of emotions and reflection and yeah, just that. But do you find that to be true, or how is that your experience, or what is it? If there's something you wanted to bring up.
Do I find what to be true?
Like in regards to the emotion part, or yeah, just as we're speaking, I'm curious if there's a question you have in particular to your relationship, or yeah, like anything.
I have a question on the long term. It sounds like it's like when some of those tests or trials come up, it's like a practice of returning to love and seeing the lesson in it versus like being in a more reactive state. Or like with regard to like ultimatums, for example.
Yes. Yeah, for the long term is, yeah, open in that way, and it can go either way depending on what you set.
I feel like I do that with the questions. So I do like sit and reflect. Usually I try to do before. So I used to be very hot-headed and would say a lot of things in blazing anger. And I try not to do that anymore.
Nice. That's awesome. And there are times when that's relevant and there are times when it isn't. And so that's great. Yeah. That was just one of the pieces there that needed to bring awareness to, and it sounds like you have already. So that's awesome. Okay. And so any other questions that you have?
If there was like one like major kind of challenging piece to be aware of, what would you say?
It's interesting. What I'm hearing is and I'm hearing this from your ancestors, and I'm not exactly sure why, but communication. I'm hearing like the opening and closing, the opening to and closing of, and being really open to hear.
That resonates.
Those were like open containers for things and then completed a container and create another container for like talking about another thing or working through another thing.
I also see that was like the pattern of like really open to communication and like having it flow and then like being more like in our internal processes too. Together in that openness more.
Yeah. Yeah, and like really seeing that both of you have this also beautiful intention of love, to love and be loved, and opening to that more, and coming in your communication from that place, allowing the natural share that can happen from there. Yeah. Yeah, and so one of the ways to really support that, holding that container, an open container in that way, is doing a simple practice together of silence, beginning together in silence, allows us to really find how we can sink in and drop in and open before we begin any other action. So even doing that for 3 to 5 minutes. And that could be with eye gazing or not, or just looking out into the sunset or sunrise together. But whatever it is, it's just done together in silence. Yeah. Self-care is also so important. Like both of you guys, looking at your charts, you work a lot. There's a lot of things to do. There's a lot of things you're here to do. And just like really taking care of yourselves is important. And extending that to each other.
What about like life path collaboration? Anything to speak on around that?
Okay, let's see. What do you mean like the life path? Do you mean a career together kind of thing, or?
Like soul purpose crossover.
Mhm. I mean, looking at your charts in all the different ways, the placements of everything, there certainly is this synergy that is happening. How you're both, as we were talking about earlier, regarding the way you are working in the world that can easily support each other's work internally and externally, right? Like, so for example, we were talking about, and it also sounds like you have these qualities as well, Rose, of being the initiator and the visionary because you're super present. Because visionary does not only mean seeing the future, it's actually being really present to access it, because the future is in the present moment. It's everything is connected. So it's this quality of, I mean, there's certainly, both your charts are potent and gear for being here at this time and place, right? There's a lot of work, there's a lot of gifts, a lot of intelligence in the way you are internally as being intelligent, resourceful, creative individuals. And then also then putting that into the world, what you're doing. And so the life path is really, it's like really seeing how your skill sets and what you're creating can support each other. And in your chart, it's the focus is not, as we were talking about, the career, but that the change is moving through you, that quantum pulse that you're creating, right, is moving through you in downloading that divine inspiration into manifestation. And then, I mean, both of you, and then also being really present to allow that flow and change to happen. I feel like that's both in your charts, right? And as the earth, both of you hold that, hold the intelligence of the earth, hold the power of manifestation and abundance of the earth. So, I mean, yeah, your charts are powerful. I was looking at they're different actually things that I look for to see if there's any weaknesses and blockages in the charts. Like there's what we call breaks and chun conflicts and different disharmonies. You didn't have that in your charts. Your charts are actually quite great and has a lot of potential and a lot of support. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Maybe I should have said that before. Saying you guys don't have all these craziness that most people have in their charts. You guys are good to go. Yeah. Yeah, totally. So yeah.
So you were mentioning that you were mentioning that Katie is a natural like natural intuition, and that I'm a natural empath. And I'm curious in what ways, like let's say we go into like we're leading a workshop or we're going into a space, in what ways we can synergize those talents to like read a room or support like a group of students.
Because you guys can read a room before you go in, you can already assess what is needed in a deeper way from the students, from the space, from what's happening. and and then how it's actually moving, right? So you're actually relating at a deeper place and allowing and surrendering that guidance to come through rather than just planning it, right? Okay, this is what we're going to do. Da, 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 da. It's actually your presence is part of the evolution of what is being created, right? Your sensitivity. And in that, you're actually also then sharing and teaching how to open to that, because in looking at your charts, being an empath and intuitive, that is what we're needing, right? In so many ways, we've just become dependent on our intellect. Oh, there we are. Okay. We've become dependent on our intellect to guide the process and what it looks like, rather surrendering to allow the depth of our being to guide the process is actually what we need to do to actually become more familiar with it, to learn how to work with it, how to recognize it, and how to wield its energies. So like we've been talking about, it's not what it looks like, whether that's a career, etc. It's actually who you guys are, who you Gaias are. Gaia, like literally. you know, um, it's your presence, that what you actually share is
Look
your
like
and transmission, right? Then what you're teaching is a transmission rather than just a lecture. So that's what happens when you become an intuitive, or you are an intuitive and an empath, and you can download that information at that depth.
The presence of the transmission feels really resonant.
Mm-hmm. Olympics and corner did that.
Oh, what was that?
There was an event we went to where we were we're moving a lot of energy, and a lot of people noticed for sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that's looking at your chart, that's your superpower. Awesome. And like we were talking about earlier, the spirit, whoever is actually the person who's the most conscious in the room is the one who's the most powerful, because then they know how to wield that energy. It's not the information. So in that way, you both hold a lot of power together. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for just opening to this and inviting me to read your charts and have these conversations and explorations and journeys in such an intimate, it's so intimate to see ourselves and our partnerships. So thank you for your vulnerability, your honesty. I really appreciate that, and more power to y'all and what you're doing in the world.
Thank you. I do have one question on that, like presence as a transmission. Would you say that's something to really come back to and focus on in like collaboration and work in the world?
I feel like it is one of the most important practices in the world. If you cannot, that's always been the practice, right? Coming back into presence. I think we forget as humans that actually when we said yes to coming to the earth, that's our gift, is being present. If we're not present, if we're lost in our mind, if we're lost in our emotions, if we're lost in the distortions of the reality we think, then we've lost it completely. So it is presence, coming back to what is real, the reality of who we are, where we are, how we are in the present moment. Yeah, most people have forgotten what that is and how to be authentic and real in the moment, to have authentic connection. And most people are not present to actually even have that. So yeah, I feel like that is one of the most important practices we can have. And it is, as humbling as it just is that. It's not this great superhero power. It's like, oh, it's just me. And here's what I've got. There it is. You know. Yeah. So yeah, it's absolutely coming back to your presence and realizing in that moment where it isn't a moment that you're actually so much more than you could ever imagine, the possibility of that moment and what you're creating. Because that's where the true power is, right? God, the divine, the unseen realms, all of that, they're in the present moment. That's where
Thank
everything
you.
access. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, if there's time, I do have one more question around our ancestors and being really curious, as you had mentioned, some issues with money for me, or like grief for you. Was it grief for you? I forget. But I'm curious if there is like some type of practice you can recommend first, that our ancestors begin to work together to nourish our joint project if they're not already. And secondly, that there are some of the ancestors that were not well when they have passed, and how to mitigate some of those effects that are then coming into play within our current moment.
Yeah. The part about the money specifically is there's like a three step process there. First is there's the 9-day practice that I think Katie knows that I shared in our class. And it's a specific practice in working with one ancestor. And if you might know, there might be a story, or your parents might know, whoever that might be, an ancestor who died in that way, working with that particular ancestor. So there's a 9-day practice to do that. And the 9-day is actually a 9-day, like 9-day purgatory or bardo, which is also something energetic, different 9 states that we move through in our own lives as a transition. And so it's a 9-day
So
practice.
like someone that died suddenly and unexpectedly, then?
Someone who died unexpectedly didn't feel like they actually resolved their life, like they feel incomplete. So that energy continues. I feel incomplete. I can't finish. I can't complete this. I don't have to sustain this. Whatever that story is still continuing.
So with your intuition, I'm curious if you tune in, if that would be my Papa Grande, my great great grandfather, who was like a general in the People's Liberation Movement, and to the people who worked the land, and was kind of, I think, cursed and murdered through his work in that.
Yeah. Usually it is with someone who died tragically. Yeah. Yeah. It feels. Yeah. And sometimes there is an energy of revenge.
Yeah, there was a vengeance thing before that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm feeling. There's a vengeance, something. Yeah. That. And then so the second step is to also then look at your relationship with money. Like, what is money to you? What is, because money in and of itself is the value we give it. So the value that you're giving, what is value to you, right? How are you valuing yourself, and what is the value you're giving to money? And then the third step is really being systematic in like, okay, how am I going to change my relationship with money? What are the habits that I've learned what are the habits that I continue to do that I don't want to, and how can I, so there's the spiritual with your ancestors, then there's the energetic with yourself, and then there's the actual physical thing that you need to do to change the situation. So that could even be reading a book. There's a great book about the soul of money by Lynn Twist. You know, if you need to really redefine what money is. Yeah. Because a lot of the times the way we actually handle money is how we were taught by our parents unconsciously. So then we just continue that unconscious, you know, unless we actually reprogram it. And in your case, it is important to reprogram. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
well, I've definitely reprogrammed my ability to make money. I feel pretty good in that area. Feel pretty capable. But yeah, in terms of like managing and just not spending everything that I get, and you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so like I guess budgeting or something, and having a system, and then when like, and so that, you know, you have to be compassionate because it is a new thing that you're going to be learning. So don't, you know, it's important to, when we're learning these new things, especially if it's in our ancestry, right? So it's been, yeah, just simmering there for a little bit in different energies. Yeah, and so maybe I would love to, maybe in 2 to 3 weeks or a month, just have like a 30-minute check-in and follow-up of all these different little interesting things that we've talked about today, and seeing if at that point in time you guys just have questions or a refinement or a perspective or a comment. You know, just
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Thank you.
yeah. Yeah. I a lot of the times like I share this information with people and then they go off, and then I hear from them maybe a year later, and they're like, oh my gosh, now I see things different, or whatever. And it's amazing. And so we don't necessarily have to have it in a few weeks, etc. But I would love to just check in with y'all, because this is a lot of different pieces too. And it sounds like you guys are moving through, I mean, this year is a year of transformation and redefining and revisioning to some degree. And so, you know, all of these different pieces, may it serve you however it needs to really kick ass in the world. You know?
Feels that way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, much love to each of you, and to your ancestors who have shown up and shown their love and support for both of you. So thank you to everyone here. With love and light, bless you, bless you, bless you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.